Okay, good. All right, folks, welcome. Recording is in session. Welcome everybody to Earth Day at home. We are thrilled that you are all here. Welcome to the folks coming online. We always love to know where people are from, so go ahead and let us know. So Earth Day at home, this Earth Day at Home series. I'm Michelle Backus with Rutgers Cooperative Extension, and this Earth Day at Home series is part of Rutgers Cooperative Extension, which is part of the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station. Rutgers Cooperative Extension is the outreach arm of the university, and we are a partnership between the counties there's an extension office in every county in New Jersey except for Hudson County, and it's a partnership between the university and the counties that we serve, and we provide research-based, science-based information to the public on a whole host of different topics and issues. So if you have a problem that you're looking to solve, go ahead and reach out to your local extension service for help. So the purpose of this webinar series is we started it what seems like quite a long time ago, but we started it the week before Earth Day, and the purpose is to give you simple actions that you can do at home to help improve the environment. And every week we cover a different topic on what you can be doing at home to help improve your local community and protect the environment. We are using WebEx for this presentation, and you can go ahead and ask your questions in the chat box, which is on the right-hand side. That should be, it depends on your screen, but just click on chat, and you should be able to put your questions right in there. Everyone should be muted on entry, and if you could please stay muted, I would appreciate that. Also, these recordings are all available on our Earth Day at Home website. So where you went to register, you missed any of the past sessions, you can go there, and this session will be posted on that website. At the end of Sal's presentation, there is going to be a poll, so please stick around for the poll and to help us determine how we're doing. And then also, the Earth Day at Home series is provided to you folks for free, to the public for free, but we would love it if you could make a donation to our program. Any amount would be appreciated. We're going to put the link in the chat box to donations to the Environmental Steward Enrichment Fund, and donations help support our volunteer efforts, including internships and scholarships and supplies. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to introduce Sal Mangiafico, who is the county agent and associate professor for Cumberland County and also Salem County. And Sal is going to be talking to you about a topic I'm really excited about, exploring your watershed from home. So Sal, if you're ready to go, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michelle. So this evening, this might be a somewhat different presentation than we're used to in topics. The point of it is to introduce some online tools that we have that I like, that I found interesting, that help us kind of explore the world around us a little bit. Explore our watershed, explore our soils. So I'm just going to introduce basically 4 tools tonight, and we'll go and we'll look at them live if that works well. I don't need to introduce myself anymore. So the first one I'd like to look at is called Openstreetmap. And Openstreetmap is something that's sort of near and dear to my heart because I use it a lot. Something I discovered some time ago, and I really do. I like it, and I participate by adding to it, and I'll explain what that means. So Openstreetmap, you can think of it as a mapping system or a project or a set of mapping data. So it's sort of the data that underlies the map. It's not necessarily the app itself or the website itself. It is open access, so people can use this. and it has what you might think of as a wiki model of editing. That is, anyone can go in and edit it, and then other people in the community can either roll back those edits if it's not something appropriate, or everyone just works together and they continue to improve the map. It is it's a free thing. It's royalty free, so there's a lot of websites and apps that use it because you don't have to pay for that mapping data. One thing that's really nice about it is that you can download the entire state map. So for example, onto your phone, and that includes the roads and points of interest along the way. So what's really nice about that is you can use these maps without a cell signal. So there's been times, actually I was in Canada some years ago and I didn't have mobile data there. So I just had this map, I just downloaded all of Nova Scotia, and then you have driving directions and everything all downloaded onto your phone. And then certain groups of people may use this map in especially with certain apps that cater to it. For example, one thing that's nice is some places you go hiking, they will have the trails marked, sometimes with things like water sources or shelters. I was up in Bear Mountain a few years ago, and it was nice because a lot of the trails were marked. So we actually went up one trail and then followed the map down a different trail that we didn't have like a paper map of or anything. Okay, so to access this map, there's a variety of ways you can do it. You can access it on your desktop computer. You can access it by phone. There's really a lot of different phone apps. I put some links there, just a list of the iOS phone apps and then a list of the Android phone apps. And I won't open that up for you, but there's quite a few, and as you can imagine, some are free, some are paid, some have certain interests, like they might be oriented towards hiking or towards biking or towards driving navigation. And we'll take a look at this map in just a second. And then, as I was saying, the map itself is really the underlying data. So what it looks like can change depending on the app or depending on the, even the style it's rendered in. So for example, my opening slide had a picture of the same area. This is a different rendering, so it looks different. The data is the same, but what is shown and the way it's shown is a little bit different. Okay, so one thing that's really neat about Openstreetmap is that you can add to it yourself. So this is something I've been doing just kind of as a hobby, as I go around town and go visit some of my local open space areas, adding some things in there, amenities, things like parking areas. I've done some trails and put those in and such. You can do this editing on your computer, or you can do it on your phone. And again, of course, there's various apps that do it. And so, some apps are, of course, good for kind of simple editing. So for example, just like adding businesses is pretty simple. It's just a point. You add a business and say what it is. Whereas for some, little bit more advanced tasks like putting in trails or something, you might use a different app for that. And I won't get too far into all that. Okay. So what kind of information do you add to the map? Well, one thing is if you have local knowledge, right? Like if you know, okay, I know Rita's Italian Ice is on this corner, this street, and this street, and it's not on the map, I could add that there. People use aerial imagery. So you can look at aerial photographs, and if you can determine, okay, I can see this is where the parking area is, or I can see this is where the bridge is, you could add those things in. You can be on the ground with GPS. So if you're walking a trail, you can be using your GPS on your phone and kind of add in points as you go along. And then maybe if you wanted to back home, kind of clean that up. You're not supposed to use other maps, right? So you're not supposed to go to like Google Maps and take their data and then put it on Openstreetmap because that's not allowed. But there's other sources of public data. You know, we have lots of public geographic data which may be allowed to be used on Openstreetmap. Okay, so now I'm going to try to go to the live. We'll see how this works. All right, let's take a look at this in real time. Hope everyone can see that. So I just brought up the OpenStreetMap map, and this is an area, you can see this is a part of the Cohansey River Wildlife Management Area. So that's a WMA state-owned public access area. And there's Shepherd's Mill Pond there. This is in Greenwich in Cumberland County. So I just want to kind of, well, let's do this first. So, and so if you can see these trails in here, I've added these myself. So I added, for example, this access road. We zoom in. There's a beach there. There's a boat ramp there. And then I added in these trails just by walking them and kind of putting in the GPS points as I went. So for me, this is it's not an entirely at-home thing, although you could do some editing at home if you wanted to. But it's a way to be out in some of the local areas and engage with that area in a little more active way than just instead of just walking the trail, you're also mapping the trail so that others could use it as well. And so I put in these trails. For example, if you can, I believe you can see my cursor here. These come up as viewpoints, so there's this nice spot here where you can kind of look at the lake, and there's usually eagles hanging out there. So one way to edit this would be right on the website. See what it's going to do. Okay, and when you go there, it brings up the some of the aerial imagery, so you can see things. And so this whole map is editable, right? Like if I wanted to change where this road is just made up of little points, right? So I can change these points, I can move them around, change the shape of the road. If maybe someone had put it in incorrectly. Or I could change where this trail is. Again, it's all editable. If there was something, so for example, here there's a information sign at the trailhead. If that weren't there, someone could go in and add that, for example. Okay, so that's something I've been doing over the last several months, giving me a way to kind of engage with some of the open areas around me. But let me just show you one more thing.
Sal,
yep.
Question: Is any of this like confirmed by anyone else, or crowdsourced or anything like that?
It's basically that wiki model of editing. So in general, there's not like an official person who looks over things. It's not set up like that. Other people can see when you make changes, and so there's some community oversight. You're keeping an eye on things to make sure those changes are kind of reasonable. I guess for the most part with mapping, unless someone's really a troll and they just want to mess things up, there's not much motivation. I mean, people can make errors, and there's sort of good practices about the way we label things and that kind of stuff. So people can make errors that way. But I think it's different than, for example, something like Wikipedia, where you might have competing points of view about something. Mm-hmm. Right? Like if you have some controversial figure, you might have somebody editing it to make them look like a bad person, and then somebody going back and editing it to make them look like a good person. On a map, I don't think there's quite that same dynamic.
Right. Okay.
So at least since I've been using it, and maybe it's been a year or so, I've been kind of playing with it. I don't know. I haven't seen anything real squirrely or anything. Let me just zoom out a bit. So that's a natural area there, and you can see there was the the boundary of the public lands. There were some trails put in. There's a couple other pieces of information, for example, where the beach and boat ramp is. I'm going to scoot up to Bridgeton City.
Question, Sal. There's a question. How do you save your map?
Oh, it's saved. Well, if you did it on here on the website, it's automatically saved. You're editing the actual map. If you're using, an external piece of software, either on your phone or on your computer, you upload it. But that's all there is. So it's not saved locally. It's all I guess you'd say cloud-based. I just wanted to go up to Bridgeton here, just to give you a little bit different of an environment. So here, there's a lot of like businesses put in. Okay. So we kind of just zoom in on Commerce Street here. There's just a lot of these businesses put in. There's Bank of America, there's Nick's Barber Shop, Dominion Title, La Cabana, Mexican restaurant. So it's just kind of a different environment where there's a lot of businesses. So again, people can go in, add businesses, get rid of businesses if they go out of business or move or whatever. Okay. So that's what I wanted to show on that one. I'm just going to check quick in the chat to see.
No, okay. Yeah, no other questions thus far.
Okay. So that's OpenStreetMap. As I said, that's something I really like to use, and it gives me a way to engage a little more actively, either when I'm out in an open area, like I said, maybe putting in trails, or if I'm out, taking a walk in the city of Bridgeton, I can put in some of the local businesses that I like and make sure they're on there. The second tool I wanted to talk about.
I apologize. Before
Sure.
you move on, another question. Is OS Maps the same app? The one called OpenStreetMap World Coverage is $2.99. But there's something called OS Maps. Is this the same app?
I don't know. So as I said, there's really a lot of apps that use this map. Some of them are free. Some of them are not free. Some of them are a little bit of a freemium model. You get most of it for free, but you need to pay a little bit for some of it. And I don't know that app offhand.
Okay. And another question, how did you get the satellite image?
Oh, on there, as soon as you go into edit, it just pops it up. So it gives you that as a background to editing to kind of help you edit as you're doing that.
Okay.
So the second tool I want to talk about is the Web Soil Survey. So this picture here is the way we used to get information about soil surveys. This is an old printed book that I still have around. So you'd have this book maybe at your local extension office or your NRCS office, and you could go and look up the soil of where you are. And there'd be printed maps in there, so with all the soil mapping units delineated. And then you would go and you'd look up a table of the soil properties as they relate to what you're thinking of. So this one, I'm sure you can't read it, and I can barely read it, but it's recreational development. So it's things like picnic areas, playgrounds, camp areas. And then for each of these soils, if it's suitable or not suitable for each of those, for that recreational development. So that's the way we used to do things. And I put the link here in the presentation to the Cumberland County book as an example. The old books are still kind of useful, even if they're older and they may not be quite as up to date. Sometimes it's nice having that printed version of things. Just for a little background, soil surveys in the U.S. began in 1899, and some of the earliest surveys are in Cecil County, Maryland. That's near Elkton, the Connecticut River Valley, particularly where they're growing tobacco. And that's where I'm from. I'm from Connecticut, and I'm from that part of Connecticut. So probably a lot of people are surprised that they traditionally have grown a lot of tobacco in Connecticut, but that's where they grew, especially under a shade cloth, and they would grow the tobacco that's used for the wrapper of a cigar. And apparently, it was very high quality. It was a very high quality product. So it was a sort of a famous product of Connecticut is that kind of tobacco. And then also New Mexico and Utah. Just those are some of the spots they started with. And of course, early on, they were really concerned with agricultural soils, determining what soils would be good for what kinds of agriculture, and then also, what improvements would need to be made to the soils. One thing to note is that soils are classified in a hierarchical fashion, something like the way we classify organisms in biology. The most specific level of classification in the soil is called series. So we talk about a soil series, and that's something like the species in biology. So it's a pretty specific type of soil. It has specific characteristics. And the Web Soil Survey will list things by soil series. It actually goes a little bit more fine than that. And so the map units, there could be several different map units that are all part of one series. But they break it down a little bit more in terms of slope and texture. And we'll see that in a minute. So the Web Soil Survey is the official product of the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. So it's sort of the most up-to-date and official US data on soils. And so just looking at things kind of, just the data that the Web Soil Survey will give you, there's a few useful things. One thing I find kind of interesting is it does indicate if soils are what they call prime farmland soils, or for example, farmland of state importance. So that's an interesting and important kind of piece of data just to know. Soils that are like prime farmland, we like to keep them in farmland and not destroy them by developing them in some other way. But it also gives you some useful information for those of you who have had a little background in soils. For example, the soil texture will tell you that. It'll tell you the drainage. So that is, how well the soil drains, if it stays wet or if it drains pretty well. The depth to the water table, also important. If you have a high water table, for example, if you have plants that don't like to get their feet wet, they may not be happy with a soil that has a shallow depth to the water table, and also the water holding capacity. And that's how much water the soil can hold that's useful for plants. So something with a low water holding capacity, the soil might be very droughty, and that may be a concern if you're trying to grow either crops or ornamental crops or landscape or lawn, whatever. So there's some of this stuff is very useful either for us at home to think about like what landscape plants might grow pretty well in our soils, and then also cases where we're thinking about doing some kind of development there. If we're thinking about putting in a house with a basement, is that reasonable? If we're looking to put in campsites, is it going to be a reasonable spot for those? And so that's some of the information the Web Soil Survey gives you. Okay, so basically, and we'll do this live again in a minute. But basically, what you do to use this is you're going to look up. You can look up by an address, or you can put in, for example, a county. It's easy where you can pan around the map and zoom in and zoom out and find the area of interest for you. And then you define sort of an area of interest. So if you're looking about the soils at your house, you're going to want to try to define an area of interest more or less encompassing your yard. From there, the Web Soil Survey will show you the soil series in that area. And again, like I said, it's really the map units that are a little bit more fine than the soil series itself. And then from there, you can get some information about the soil series. You can get some information about the ratings of that soil for specific applications. So for example, if you're growing crops, if you're growing wine grapes, they have a whole separate assessment on that if you're building buildings. And then what's kind of nice too is they have a feature where you can just export kind of a whole report. One thing to note though, the maps, the soil survey areas on the maps are estimated to some degree. So we shouldn't assume that they're very precise. They're not as precise as if you zoom all the way in on the map, it might suggest. So you have to take everything with a little bit of grain of salt. There probably wasn't a soil scientist in your yard looking at every square foot of your yard determining what soil was there. Okay, so let's see if we can bring this up live again. Okay, so this is the web soil survey page. You can read about it. There's a button here that says Start Web Soil Survey. So we'll just go ahead and do that. And so it's somewhat of a busy interface, but it's not too bad once you get to use it. So I'm going to go over here on the left under navigation for address. I'm just going to put in Shepherd's Mill, which is the first place we are looking at on Openstreetmap. I think this will work. Yep, it brought it right up. So it's got some sort of standard mapping navigation buttons up here. So I'm just going to kind of zoom in. And then, as I said, you have to define an area of interest, and you can do it by a polygon, or I'm just going to do a rectangle to keep things simple. And we'll just take a look at a chunk of the WMA here. Yeah, maybe something like that. So once we've created that area of interest, you can see it shaded in there. You can then go up here and look at the soil map. So we'll move over to the soil map. See if I can scroll down a bit. And so it delineates these areas of, as I said, they're soil map units. And so they have sort of unfriendly names on them. I don't know if you can see them. The lettering's pretty small. If I can bring that a little bit bigger. Yeah. So for example, in this middle area here, it's DOCB. And then we go over on the left here and read what that says. So it's a Downer loamy sand. Downer's the series. Downer is actually the state soil of New Jersey. So that's exciting. And then beyond the soil series, as I said, the map unit has a few more, it's a little more specific. In this case, it says 0 to 5% slopes. So it's Downer loamy sand, 0 to 5% slopes is this DOCB area. And that's a big chunk of it. It says, it gives you the percentage of the area, 26% of the area. So if we were so inclined, we could click on this and get some information about that map unit. And so it gives you, lots of information in here. It does mention it's a farmland soil of statewide importance. So it's not prime farmland soil, but it is of statewide importance. What else does it tell you? It describes, the typical, what these soils typically are like, and I won't go through all this. But for example, it gives you the depth to restrictive feature, more than 80 inches. So some soils will have maybe a hard pan that prevents roots from going too deep, or that prevents water from percolating through. And this soil doesn't really have that, you know, within the top 80 inches. Depth to water table, more than 80 inches. So if you have plants that don't like to get their feet wet, they're not going to be bothered growing in the soil. Frequency of flooding, none. Frequency of ponding, none. Okay, so it doesn't get wet. And available water storage and profile, moderate. So it doesn't hold a ton of water for plants, but it does hold some. And I think the only other thing I wanted to mention is the, okay, well that's good. So it gives you a little bit of information about the soil itself you can look at. But also, if we were interested in using that soil for a particular use, we then hop over to Soil Data Explorer. Let's see, I'm going to go under Building Site Development, and let's look at lawns, landscaping, and fairways. Now, it just so happens that I have downer soil at my house. So I would be interested to see how well it does, for example, as a lawn and landscape area. What it's done here is it's colored in all those soils red, meaning they're not good for this purpose. And then if you scroll down a bit, it gives you a little more information about it. So let's just look at the downer again. The rating is very limited. And one of the reasons it says is low exchange capacity. So that is, the soil is such that it doesn't hold nutrients. That just means it doesn't hold nutrients very well for plants. So it's kind of a tough soil to use without amending it. I mean, you could put in, you know, composted manure or compost and, you know, build up that soil some. But in its natural state, it's not great for a landscape area simply because it's got that low exchange capacity. So it doesn't hold on to nutrients well. And let's just look at one other, let me see if I can find something else. Okay, let's look at dwellings with basements. We'll switch to that. And this time, our downer soil in the middle here is green, so it's good for dwellings with basements. Some of the surrounding soils are still red. And so if we just kind of zoom down, we can see for the downer soil, the rating is not limited, so it's fine for dwellings with basements. But some of the other soils, the depth to the saturated zone is too shallow, right? So in other words, the soil will be saturated down below the surface, not too far. So not a great place to put in a basement. You're gonna have some problems with, you know, water seeping into the basement. And one even mentions that there's ponding and flooding likely on that soil. So again, not a great place to put in the basement. And there's just all kinds of different uses that are in here that you could look up to see how well your soil would do with that. And then finally, let's see if this comes up. Doesn't seem to come up. But under this area that says shopping cart, it allows you just to print out kind of a report. So it'll kind of show you your map. It'll give you the information about the soils that you had. So, you know, it's a several page report of all kind of the information you already looked at. Just puts it together in a nice PDF. And that can be real, it's a nice way to have it. All right, I'm gonna close that down.
Sal, it's just catching up on some questions here. Construction of buildings, homes, apartments, etc., removes the original soil and replaces it with quote-unquote other soil. How does one use the web soil survey to determine soil type and use if the original soil is no longer there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in some cases, if soil's been disturbed a lot, it may just say something like urban soil or urban complex soil or something like that. You know, where there's been enough movement of soil and construction and stuff that there's no, it's not reasonable to even look at what soil was originally there. So for some of these properties, as the question asks, you know, during say, you know, residential construction, yes, we might strip away some of the soil, and then either bring that back or bring back some other kind of topsoil when we're done. But a lot of the characteristics are deeper than that. So for example, what we were just looking at, like depth to water table, unless you're really messing with the hydrology somewhere on that site, that depth to water table is still going to be kind of the same after construction. So if in the spring, your high water table is only 12 inches below the surface, you know, it's still going to be there after construction. So if you have a basement there, you know, it's very possible to get water seeping in say the spring and the fall when that water table's up. But yeah, I mean that's always a consideration, is that, you know, all of our, I guess in general, when you think of the landscape as a whole, even though, I mean, certain parts of the state, certainly we've done an awful lot of residential, urban, you know, commercial construction. But I guess on the landscape as a whole, still a lot of the soil is intact. You know, we still have a lot of farm fields where we've only plowed up, you know, we've plowed the top 8 inches, but otherwise, hopefully, you know, have maintained the soil's integrity. And we have forests and things, so so soil maps are still useful in that way. We haven't totally obliterated the soils around us, I guess.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Another question. Do you know what year they started to track soil conditions, and was that throughout the United States?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I have any comments on that. Like I said, I mean, earlier on, they were really looking at agricultural soils.
Yeah.
As, you know, as decades went on, certainly the Dust Bowl era was kind of a real awakening that we needed to pay attention to the quality of our soils.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, just a couple last comments about soils. There is so for series, there's official series descriptions that are put out by the USDA NRCS. And I won't go there now and show all that, but it's another description of the soil series. So if you looked up the Downer soil series, it gives you some different information, but it's a nice little biography, if you would, about that series. So when you figure out what soils you have at home, you can go and print that out, and that's your little biography of your soil. And it also gives you some maps. So here's, again, the Downer series. And this is a map of its extent, where it's found, which I think is just kind of neat. Also, I wanted to mention, there's probably several apps that do this, but the one I've used is called Soil Web, and that's for Android and iPhone. It uses the same USDA soil data, and what it does, it's a very simple app that it uses your location, and it tells you what soil is at your location. And then it kind of links to the other information, the series description, some of the information we were talking about, the map of extent and such. You know, so it's kind of a nice little thing. You just hit the button that says Get Soil Data, and it pulls up. This was me at work today. Pulls up, you know, 80, and I think you can set the range of, you know, how wide of a radius it's looking at for the soils. I think so. And so here, you know, 80% sassafras. You can kind of click on the information about the sassafras soil. You know, it tells you things like it's a well-drained soil, it's prime farmland soil. It gives you a number for available water storage, which is about 14 centimeters per 100 centimeters of soil. If that doesn't make a lot of sense to you, don't worry about it for now. So that's another kind of simpler tool to use. The web soil survey, I know it's a little bit, when you first start trying to use it, it's a little unintuitive, maybe even a little intimidating, but having something like this, like a simple app that just gets the location right where you are, that's a nice little tool. Okay, next tool. There's a website from the U.S. Geological Survey called StreamStats. And the one thing I really like about this website is that it'll delineate watersheds or sub-watersheds for you, basically the area draining to any point on a stream. It gives you some other useful statistics like the drainage area that you've delineated, also how much forest cover, urban cover, the population density, and it will also estimate some flow statistics. So the amount of flow that would be at that point, it can give it to you monthly if you ask for it. So you might be thinking, like, why is it useful to delineate watersheds at all? And what's really interesting is if you're thinking about water quality, if you're thinking about maybe your favorite lake or pond, you're thinking about your favorite stream, it's interesting to think about what land area drains to that point, right? So it's all the questions about what roads, what businesses, what residential areas drain to that point. And then also looking at land use in general. Is it forest use in that watershed? Is it urban use? Is it farm? Just for a little bit of background, traditionally we used to do watershed delineation with topo maps, and once you get used to that, it's not too difficult using the contour lines, and you can figure out where the watershed is. Now we have computer algorithms and GIS software, Geographic Information System software, that can delineate watersheds, usually using a digital elevation model. So basically the idea is that if you have a map that has the elevations of the land surface, then you can tell the computer to figure out how the water is going to flow, where the water is going to drain to based on that. So you can do that in GIS software. Most of us don't really like to use GIS software unless we're really good at it, because it's not always real intuitive to use, and to do something simple, sometimes it takes a long time. But just to note, like, a lot of this information is available from the state as GIS data sets. So we do have access to these. It's just having the software and knowing how to access it. But that's why it's nice to have these simple online tools that do some of this stuff for us, so we don't have to spend a lot of time and effort, say, building a map in GIS software. All right, let me skip through that. And we'll go right to the website again. Oops. Hang on a sec. Okay, there we go. USGS StreamStats website. So I'm just going to put in the zip code for Woodstown in Salem County. And so you can search by place or whatever. You do on the left here have to pick which region you're using. So we have New Jersey, so we're going to use that. One thing to note on the screen here, you can see how it's a lot of it's kind of checkered out, and those are areas that are tidal. So it's going to have trouble. It basically doesn't want to try to delineate watersheds if it's in a tidal area, right? Because not only do you have water flowing from upstream, you also have the tides coming in from the bay or from downstream. just kind of complicating things. We're going to zoom in enough, and I thought we would just, this is Memorial Lake in Woodstown, so let's see what drains to Memorial Lake in Woodstown. You have to hit this delineate button over here, and then you go and you pick a spot on this pixelated blue line indicating the stream. And it's working on it. Takes a few minutes. Not a few minutes, a few moments anyway. Still working.
I always find this so amazing, considering how much work this was to do just using GIS software. How it used to be many steps and
yes,
very, very special software. Now it's all free and online and at everyone's fingertips.
Yeah, and what's kind of nice about this too is you can download this. So if you are using GIS software, you could come here, delineate this, just download it and stick it in your GIS software.
Yeah.
So
people have it so easy these days.
I know. It wasn't too many years ago I did that process.
Oh my God.
Also for a paper, and I had several points I had to do it, and if you get the point a little bit off, it wouldn't work, and you have to rerun it again and again until you got it.
The olden days.
Yep. So here in yellow is the watershed draining to Memorial Lake in Woodstown. Right. So we can go in here and we could look at, knowing what's on these roads. There's a lot of US 40. We could think about what businesses are on US 40. There's a lot of farms in here. There's some other lakes upstream, Daretown Lake, Slabtown Lake. Right. So we could take a look at, what's in that watershed. Think about what's impacting Memorial Lake. Real useful to do. Just real quickly, it'll also give you some statistics. Okay. So basically, if you go down here to basin characteristics, and I know I'm going through this quickly, there are some sort of steps listed in the presentation. If we selected a bunch of information we want to know about this area, I call it the Memorial Lake Watershed. It's working. So it brings up a little report, gives you your map, and then it gives you there's just a few little pieces of information that are useful in here. The drainage area, 14.6 square miles. The percentage of forest is 12%. Gives you the mean April precipitation, the mean June precipitation. The population density, 122 persons per square mile. So there's just a few little useful pieces of information there about your watershed of interest. Okay. Finally, there's a lot of good mapping programs that are online. Again, where you could do this in GIS software, but to make it easy, we can use some of these online tools. This one's called the New Jersey Conservation Blueprint. So I won't, since it's getting late, I'm not going to read all this. But it's basically, it's put together by a bunch of different organizations, including Rowan University and the Nature Conservancy. And this one is focused on natural resources, but it's done in a way that's pretty quick and easy to make certain types of maps, to look at some information. As I mentioned, you could use GIS software and get the GIS data layers from the state and do some of this stuff yourself. That's pretty time intensive, but if you want things to look a certain way, or there's certain analyses you want to do, then that is a way to go. The state does have a website called GeoWeb, which has a lot of it's another web-based mapping system, and it has a lot of the GIS data layers you can use, and a lot of other just information, a lot of data that's from DEP that can be mapped on there, various things.
Sal, I just wanted to remind
Sure.
you of the poll.
Oh, the poll. Thank you. Let me start the poll.
Yeah, folks, Sal's coming towards into his last couple of slides. If you want to just get started on the poll, don't leave us just yet. He's still got some more to go, but you can get started on that if you'd like it. It'll be open for about 15 minutes.
Sure. So it should be, you just get it on the right-hand panel, Michelle?
Yep,
be there for them?
Already have found it.
Okay, good. Yeah, and it's only going to be open for 15 minutes, so don't wait too long to do that. There's also, and this is a related website to the one I'm talking about, but something called NJMap. The website is njmap2.com, which has sort of some of these pre-made maps that look at things like land use or watersheds or urban development over time. So again, it makes it real easy to do some of these things without you having to invest a lot of time in doing it. So this website, the New Jersey Conservation Blueprint, has some sort of, as I'm saying, some sort of pre-made maps where some of the information's already there to highlight this kind of information. So there's one that focuses on agricultural land. There's one that focuses on green space. There's one that focuses on ecology, and there's one that focuses on water quality. But they're also fairly customizable. You can put in different layers, turn on and off layers that you want to see, and we'll do that real quick in a minute. Okay, so again, I will jump to the live map. Okay, so you can see you can kind of just pick the map you're interested in. Let's start with ecological integrity map. Bring that up. And I'm just going to zoom in. And this is really nice. I'm just kind of scrolling in. Lets you move the map around, scroll in. It's real quick. It's really a pretty nice product they made. I'm going to see if I can zoom into that area of Memorial Lake that we'd looked about. Not in the right spot. Homer, Mannington, there's Woodstown. Okay, so it's pretty much on the map. It's the area to the east of Woodstown Borough. It's pretty much that watershed we had delineated in the last step. And we have a legend on the left here where they've prioritized lands according to their importance for ecological integrity. And you can go through and read how the methodology they did to do that. So here you can see most of the land is, I think it's medium or medium-low importance for ecological integrity, which is kind of interesting. So let's just do a couple of things here. I put in the municipals. If you noticed, I went through and clicked and put in the municipal boundaries. You can actually put in parcels, so that's hard to read at this level. But this is really nice to have too, where you can look at individual parcels. What else do we want to do here? We can put in the watersheds. So it's probably pretty hard for you to see, but that brownish line I just put in is actually the watershed boundary that we were looking at earlier. More or less that we had delineated earlier, not quite the same. Let's look at hydrology. Okay, so we'll put in water bodies. So you can see some of those impoundments, the lakes we were talking about last time, including Memorial Lake and some of the others. We'll put in the river. That's the Salem River there we're filling in. Put in some of the tributary streams. And then we click on this. Let me zoom out one piece. Okay. So I clicked on C1 streams, and those are streams that we have sort of a higher level of protection for. And when I click on that, you can see it comes in as yellow there. Right. So it may interest us that if we're concerned with this watershed going to Memorial Lake, that we have these C1 waterways that we want to have a higher level of protection for. You can see I'm kind of flying around. I made a list of things to add to the map here, and you can see I'm kind of flying around between the different areas. They try to organize all these different layers in kind of a logical way. So they have them by boundaries, by components, by reference. But it takes some time to kind of just go through and figure out what you want and where things are. So let me add.
Sal, question. Are
Sure.
the views drawn from GIS data and just presented differently?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm sure for any of these, it's the same GIS data that's maintained by the state, I would imagine. Okay, so let's add some wetlands. I can see it. And we'll add in some wetlands. Those are the light blue area. But let's add in this, vernal pool buffers. I don't know if you can see this or not. It's that sort of cyan colored circles are areas where vernal pools have either been identified or are suspected, and kind of a buffer around them to protect them. But this gets rather interesting also now. Now that we're looking at our watershed, we realize there's some C1 waterways that need protection. There's all these vernal pools throughout here that we want to be concerned with. Probably a lot of these are there's some forest around the Salem River up here, but a lot of it's farmed, so these are probably in some either pockets of forest or some farmed areas. And of course, we can go and we could go and look at those land use layers and figure that out if we had time. But let's also add in preserved farmland. So that's here. Wow, and look at that. So you can see a good chunk of this watershed is preserved farmland. It's all that brownish area that just got added. Those are all parcels of preserved farmland. And finally, let's put in open space. And those are those dark green areas. So you can see there's several little pieces of several parcels that have been preserved along the Salem River. Some of that might be part of the Salem River Wildlife Management Area. I'm not sure. So we have land that's preserved as preserved farmland, and then we have land that's preserved as open space land in this watershed. So all this just gives you, and then there's a lot of other things in here that you could put in and look at. But if we were exploring, if this was our watershed draining to Memorial Lake, it gives you a lot of data information you can look at to kind of understand a little bit better what's going on in your watershed, what's there that needs to be protected, and what other businesses, farms, residents are there that may have some interesting effects. So that's pretty much all I had for you tonight. I do want to thank everyone for their for being here, for their patience and participation.
Sal, could you speak to the utility of some of the tools that you discussed as far as like natural resource inventories or bureaus, things like that?
Yeah, so Michelle and I were actually having this conversation a little bit earlier today, and we're saying that for towns who towns need to put together their natural resources inventories, and so every so many years they're supposed to redo that. But right now there's so much information that's available through these kind of tools that you really could do. You could probably update those pretty easily using some of these. right? I mean, for example, if you had, you might have a map in there of preserved farmland. I don't know how old the data is on this website, but supposedly, let's just say for the sake of argument, it's fairly up to date. You could very easily make an updated map of preserved farmland, in a trivial amount of time. And likewise, some of the ecological areas, or like we're showing the 1C waterways or the vernal pools, you could access that all pretty easily, assuming the data is up to date, and update your ERI.
Okay. Can you just discuss quite another question that Steve's done a great job answering here, but others may get something out of also. Why do some streams get greater protection, and is that fair?
So I think
Just going back to like the Category 1 waterways.
Yeah. Is this something you want to answer, Michelle?
I could certainly read Steve's excellent answer.
Okay.
He's done Steve said stream protection is based upon the significance of the stream to an area, ecologically, economically, drinking water supply, traditional uses of the stream and their water quality status, clean or impaired, help to determine their status. So that's
right.
It's a DEP, it's a Department of Environmental Protection designation based on all this criteria that Steve outlined. Whether or not that's fair, well, it goes back to that definition of what a Category 1 waterway is.
Right, and it goes back to the idea that our water quality standards and our protection for various water bodies are tied to its intended use.
Right.
So the example I always give is if you have a stream that you want trout in, you're going to have different criteria than if you have a stream that doesn't have trout in it. And likewise, if it's used for drinking water, and so on.
Okay. Do you know, Steve, going back to, do you know for some of these, or how would one figure out when the data was updated? Is it on the website?
I imagine it's there somewhere.
Okay. And sometimes it's in the metadata.
Right. So yeah. So if you're using like GIS layers, what's nice is they'll have that metadata that tell you, give you some good information about when that data is from and how they got it and that kind of stuff. For some of these, easier to use websites, I don't know if it's there. It's probably there somewhere. And hopefully some of these things too, sometimes we get a grant or something to do something like this. You do this website, and then when you don't have that grant money anymore, you don't go back and update it. So hopefully for these kind of tools, they are actively maintaining them so they don't get stale. Right.
Okay, so looks like there's about 1 minute and 40 seconds in the poll. If folks may want to finish that up. If you haven't done that already, that would be great. Go through that quickly. That's a lot of the folks that are saying thank you for the specific information. There was also, looks like you've got some fellow nutmeggers on here, and gave some nice website about a tobacco museum in Connecticut. I saw that earlier.
Oh, I'll have to go there.
Yes. And then it was also noted that these websites are very robust and there's a lot of material, and this would make a great workshop where folks could really dive into the features that you're demonstrating. Okay, that's a lot of the questions, and folks are saying thank you for the presentation. So I'm just going to stop the recording. Thank you for coming online with us, folks, Hold on, I'm just going to stop the recording.